Good evening. My name is Randy Yu. I'm the curator of modern political and historical collections here at Emory University Stuart A. Rose Manuscript Archives and Rare Book Library. I can fit that on one business card, right? I want to welcome you to Emory University and to the Rose Library. Thanks for coming out. Our mission here at the Rose Library is to acquire, preserve, arrange, describe, and provide public access to materials of lasting historical value. We're here tonight because of the Rose Library's interest in documenting DIY culture, punk, and art, and documenting it in Atlanta. Over the past few years, the Rose Library has gone out to create a remarkable collection of materials that document DIY culture, both everything from the Blue Rat Gallery to the American Music Show with the amazing Dick Richards, the Atlanta Punk Collection, 800 East, the Atlanta Zine Collection, several other collections that kind of document this culture. But all these things in Atlanta didn't happen in a vacuum, right? They were all part of a national and an international conversation and network of ideas. And so our guest tonight is here to help us bring that national and international perspective to the DIY scene, to music, and to art. Now our guest tonight, Kosmo Vinyl, has been called, and I actually wrote this down, so I want to make sure I've got it.
Here, right?
Yes, right. Kosmo Vinyl has been described as a press agent, a conceptual publicist, road manager, a force of nature, MC, ringmaster, conciliary, chaperone, factotum, fromage de pompadour, the creative director of The Clash, a producer, including an album by Atlanta's own, Driving and Crying, and an artist. Ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Manhattan, New York, 10024, Kosmo Vinyl.
Hello. Am I on? Am I on?
I don't know.
No.
Well, we can do take two of that too.
Is this take two? What are we on? Can you hear me? No. As you can see, there's a reason it doesn't have roadie on that list. That's very.
That's off.
Is this on?
You got the green light. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah. Hello? Yes.
All
there
right.
You go. Sit.
All right. See, we'll get a DIY. We'll figure this all out.
That lack of technical ability is what's actually got me here tonight. When you think about the long road, because originally there were plans afoot that I would be a roadie, and that did not work out. And thank goodness for that.
So in other views that you've done, you said that you got into all of this because you were a fanatic about music.
Yes.
So, well, hang on. My question is, what sparked that fanaticism? Was there music in your house when you were growing up? Is there like a Saul on the road to Damascus moment when you saw the light? What sparked that fanaticism?
Well, first of all, I'm born in 1957 into a kind of blue-collar London existence, and the radio is just everywhere. You know, the pop music, whatever it might have been when I was really small, you know, it's definitely, you know, it's in the air. I mean, literally in the air all the time. I mean, my second earliest memory, and it might be my earliest, but I have two really early memories. And one of them is of a Buddy Holly LP cover,
Really?
torn.
Really?
And I can even remember that it was torn. And I'm not sure if that was my father's or my mother's, but that was definitely around. And then just growing up as a kid, there was music on the radio. And then I guess I was fortunate enough that by the time I'm 6 or 7 years old, it really kicks off again in Britain, you know, and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all this stuff is happening, and Spencer Davis and all these things, that kind of beat boom, the 63, 64 beat boom comes on the radio, And so it was just kind of something, I mean, literally that was kind of like in the air. And then, so I guess it just caught my imagination to some degree, And then I guess the bigger moment came that due to my complicated family story, I ended up with a stepbrother that was a mod. And this is like about 65. And he is the real fucking deal. You know what I mean? He is the real Pete Townsend fantasy type guy. Extremely good looking, extremely tough, suits, all going on, girls hanging around. And him and his friend Les, an obsession with Black American music, which is also coming on the radio. And that really kind of set me on a path because their interests were clothes, music, and girls. They didn't really seem to have any other interests whatsoever. And their existence kind of moved around that thing. And they were really like into Black American music. And we were getting some of that on the radio, Otis Redding, Tamla Motown, and things like that. But this guy Les was more involved than that. And so they became a huge influence, and what they liked and didn't like definitely, like, on a certain level, stayed with me since that age, however age I was. I bought my first LP when I was 9 years old, which was unusual in those days. So 9 years old, that would have been 66, and it's already out. It was Otis Redding, Otis Blue. And I had to have that record, and it was a lot of money, and I hustled and saved and worked odd jobs. But I would say the big thing about them was, and their worldview was, they didn't like the Beatles. Not cool at all. James Brown is cool. 4 Idiots from Up North, not cool. And this kind of like really shook my world because there was a rating. They therefore had a rating system. Do you know what I mean? Like the Stones were okay. They're kind of like beatniks. They're kind of okay. And there are a lot of college girls like the Rolling Stones, So the French girls like the Rolling Stones. So something there. They're like the Who and the Small Faces to a degree. But even that was like tampered with this, where they ain't the Temptations. Come on, do you know what I mean? You can't be the Temptations from England. That's just not possible. So they had this kind of rating system, and they held these kind of things in high regard. And meanwhile, they're very concerned about how they look and how they behave. And I think, that's really the birth of me on a certain level, and of course, slightly different circumstances changed that. But I would say that early London mod movement was probably my biggest single influence. And my father and mother would have been more 50s, They would have been more the kind of greaser type,
And so, we talked earlier, the fact that you bought an album was extraordinary because albums were real, like in England, the 45s rule, right? 7 inches rule.
Right. It was.
But albums were...
They were expensive.
They were expensive.
And then you fast forward a few years, and then I'm at school, which in England we'd call senior school. So I guess it would be the equivalent of high school. And I had like 14 LPs. And people were like, he's a fucking nut, that kid. He got like 14 LPs. You go around somebody's house, and the dad's got like 3, or somebody's got 5. And I had like 14, and people were like, this guy's crazy. So it wasn't, by today's standards, you mean? You meet people that got like 10,000 records or whatever. Guilty as charged, by the way. But it was, so it was like, it was the thing I was most interested in. And I just kind of followed it on. Do you know what I mean? From that point, I followed it on. The reggae thing happened in Britain.
Right.
And the records were cheap, and Tamla Motown, Chartbusters Volume 3, and you had to... So Christmas birthdays became, clothes and music, nothing else.
So not much has changed. Huh?
No, I mean, on a certain level, it runs that way, until children arrive,
So that's through the 60s. By the time you get to the 70s, what's the music scene like in England, like in the early, or just the music scene in general by the time the early 70s roll around?
Like in the early 70s, like my world was like, and you've got to realize you've grown up in a world where you just assume, like Tamla Motown are going to put out like 3 good singles every month forever. I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, that's what's always happened ever since you've been listening to the radio. So, the Temptations are doing it with Norman Whitfield or something. It's like just going on. So I never thought there would be a time like now where you'd be like, there's not, it's harder to find kind of like truly, truly great stuff. It seemed to be everywhere then. But for me, I guess, and the kids that I was hanging out with, the big 3 were the Stones and the Who and the Faces. And this is the Faces with Rod Stewart and Ron Wood, Ronnie Lane, Ian McLagan, and Kenny Jones. They're post-Small Faces, so they've got the perfect history. Do you know what I mean? They kind of were mods, and now they're just louts, and they're into soul music and rock and roll. And it's like, that's just perfect. Very unpretentious. And later turns out to be very important because Glenn Matlock, the bass player of the Sex Pistols, told me that this is before they had John, but the very first song that they learned in rehearsal was Had Me a Real Good Time, which is a Faces tune, So they were, they were plugged in. And then as I got to know various people, like some of the guys in The Clash and Sex Pistols and other people, we were all at the same shows. We just didn't know each other. Do you know what I mean? We're all at the Faces in Brixton or the Who at Edmonton or whatever, And the Who was kind of like, really like the old stuff, really. It wasn't so crazy about but the great thing, you go see the Who was that they played like the old stuff at the beginning, like 20 minutes. They play like I Can't Explain, Substitute, Boris the Spider. And you was kind of really into this stuff, And then the Stones were kind of like the big thing. But very disappointing when I saw them live. I was because the Faces crowd was really partisan and really like very, very aggressive in their support, They were really...
Well, and what you said something. What about the age of the crowd at a Faces
show?
Yeah,
the thing that back then was like, I would say like, I don't know there was anybody 25 at a Faces show, I mean, I was down the front with the kids, and my memories of that are kind of like 15 to 17, 18, 19. So I'm thinking like really old people, But old people at shows then were like people the same age as the group. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, like Ron Wood's like 26 or 27 or something. And you're thinking like, yeah, well, there were some old people up the back, But it was really like a different world. And like, I don't know if you see like the pictures of the Ziggy Stardust tour of Britain. It's really teenagers. It really is like young people. And like, when I worked with The Clash, it was like that energy that really kicked it off. Really kicked it off because, you got fire in you. I mean, you've got energy to burn. So we were really into that. But we weren't into the other stuff at all. Again, that mod, opinionated kind of thing.
What was the other stuff?
Well, back then, I mean, really kind of long-haired, scruffy. It's kind of like, I mean, I can only talk for myself, really, and my friends. But we had like no interest in like Black Sabbath or Deep Purple or any of these heavy rock bands. I had no interest in seeing Led Zeppelin. I mean, it just didn't. I mean, now I can see the dynamic and the craft. But at the time, I was like, I wasn't interested in that whatsoever. That, yes, to this day. I would actually like to make a public apology. This is going to be the first of many. But I was on a radio show this summer. They were talking about the World Cup. And this guy in Nashville, Steve Gorman, has a radio show, a sports show. And he got me on, and they threw me one and said, well, which group do you not like the most? And I said the Pink Floyd. I said, post Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd, you can stuff that as far as I'm concerned. But I actually would like to take that back and say I should have said yes. because you could make, you know what I mean, we ain't got no education and that thing and the other money one. I guess you could make a point there that there's something maybe thrown back there. But yes, I heard one tune once. I was house painting with these guys after I got out of punk rock and I was being anonymous. And we were painting this house and this god-awful music came, white streak of piss, whiny vocal with some weedy keyboard and some other shit on it, like some drummer who won't stop playing through everything everyone's doing. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And they said, it's Yes. And I said, this shit is worse than I imagined. It's actually worse than the cover looks. You know, it's actually, you know, that whatever that guy's name is, Roger Dean, you know what I mean? All that fantasy kind of spaceman with the chick with the big boobs and the sword and the going through the trees. And it's like, what the fuck has that got to do about anything? Do you know what I mean? So I never got involved in any of that. And it just was never it never entered my mind to buy like a Pink Floyd ticket. Some kind of grubby student with kind of jeans and dirty shoes, and it just wasn't in my world, you know. Meanwhile, do you know what I mean? Keith Richards hanging out with them chicks and stuff, man, and you're like, hey, he's got it going on there, you know what I mean? He's got it going on, you know? But no, I was never, so, I think you look at most of the early guys in the English punk scene, and I don't think, you know, there wasn't too many of them. There was a few, definitely. The guitar players all listened to Led Zeppelin, do you know what I mean? And you can see why. Do you know what I mean? Dynamics, that Page guy's got that down, do you know what I mean?
That Page
cut,
guy.
edit, bam. He can definitely do it, you know, and he can play. Not going to argue, but, you know. But I still go with the punk, like, he can play, so what? Do you know? It's like, it's not bad to be able to play, but it's not the defining. Do you know what I mean? It's not the defining moment.
Well, and this is important because there was kind of this division in the music scene at the time, right? There was that.
Absolutely.
And then there was kind of the pub rock scene, right?
Well,
So like Kilburn and the High Road.
Well, what happened in England was that, I guess, at about the time, kind of, I'm not exact on dates, but I'm going to say something like 1974, something like that. There's definitely, you know what I mean, rockers reached its fantastic bloated Persian carpet. Even Emerson, Lake and Palmer have got something at the movies. You know what I mean? Emerson, Lake and Palmer filmed, heaven forbid. You know, have mercy. You know, I mean, you know, pitiful, really. I mean, whoever did that, you know. But you know, obviously there was something started to grow in London. Some kind of alternative kind of thing started to kind of happen. And you've got a few bands, and it kind of gets labeled into a pub rock as a kind of a catch-all phrase. But I kind of prefer now the kind of artier people are using the proto-punk thing. And in a way, I think that's really good, because I end up working with a guy called Ian Dury, of which we'll talk about, first person to bring me to Atlanta. And Ian Dury had a band called Kilburn and the High Roads, which came out about this time. And, you know, they got labeled pub rock. And Ian was always upset because he said, like, you know, not 10% of our gigs were ever in pubs, you know. So I don't know why we have to be labeled with this kind of pub thing, which he didn't perceive as very kind of stylish or sexy. But there was a circuit of pubs in London. It didn't really expand outside of London, really. And the idea was that this circuit would build up, and out of that, these bands would get an elevated status. And sure enough, Ian, in a later incarnation, but probably a much more important band, ultimately, was an English rock band called Dr. Feelgood. And they come out at about this period of time. And they really are key. And old comrade of mine, who also worked with the Clash for a while, guy called Johnny Green, described it many years later as Dr. Feelgood as the John the Baptist to the Sex Pistols' second coming. You know, if the Sex Pistols were the Lord, then the Feelgoods were John the Baptist, you know? And I think that's very kind of appropriate. And what the Feelgoods were, now by this time, this is 74, then I'm 16, 17, something in there. And what the Feel-Goods were, well, they came and they played this unpretentious fast to us. Got to remember, pre-Ramones fast and then Ramones fast. It's kind of a bit like the space rocket. We'll come to that. Do you know what I mean? But this pre-Ramones fast, the Feel-Goods are playing short songs, playing old R&B, which obviously somebody like me is going to like, and their own songs. But they're 2.5, 3 minutes. They're playing them like fast, very unpretentious presentation. And the guitar player looks like a psychopath. He's got this weird kind of haircut. It's short, but it's his machine gun in the audience. And we're like, this is fucking great. And that kind of set the seeds of dissent kind of more, because like the Feel-Goods weren't all this bullshit and carpets and fucking all this crap. And do you know what I mean? Get up. And they would just like hit it. Do you know what I mean? Bam, 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 bam. Fantastic. Like hour, sweat, spent. Fantastic. And that definitely, everybody started to pick up on that. Or not everybody, but a certain type. And Ian Dury had this band, Kilburn and the High Roads. And I went to see Kilburn and the High Roads. And every time I went to see them, I could never get anybody to go again. Ian was very unfriendly presentation. And this was very important because he was an art guy, really. And I have a whole theory about that. And but Ian was like the first performer I saw that was not up there to win you over. Do you know what I mean? He had this almost sinister kind of murderer, really. Kind of, I guess that was the thing at the time. Killers. But he was like very like, introverted and not trying to be friendly. And wasn't like, oh, thank you, and oh, I like you, thank you so much. It was sinister. He had a sinister kind of thing going on. And that was a very small posse that went to see the Kilburns. And I could never find anyone to go twice. Everyone who went, you take some girl and she'd be like, oh, he's horrible. Oh, gives me the creeps. And he had yet to take more of a, later on, he mixed that in with a kind of almost Archie Rice type, Laurence Olivier from The Entertainer. It's kind of Carnival Barker kind of thing. He kind of managed to work it kind of both ways. So the version of Ian that becomes successful is definitely a more user-friendly version than the Kilburns, But the Kilburns were hugely, hugely influential to a very small group of people. It's a bit like Eno said of the Velvet Underground. He said, like, in England, like, only 100 people in London bought the Velvet Underground LPs, but every one of them formed a group, And Kilburn and the High Roads were managed by this guy briefly called Tommy Roberts, who was a very important character in the London fashion business. He had this shop, Mr. Freedom, broke a lot of barriers, set up a lot of things. He was the first guy to put Mickey Mouse on a T-shirt. Those winged boots that Elton John wore, they were Mr. Freedom. And he had this young shop assistant, a Malcolm McLaren, who really paid attention to what Tommy was doing and how he was trying to set about things. And in fact, Kilburn and the High Roads, Tommy got them all kitted out, and they were kitted out by Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood from the Let It Rock. Got a Let It Rock vintage tie on tonight in honour. And as Sex Originals, of which the Sex Pistols come out of that shop. They become the group of the clothing shop. So the influence on the Sex Pistols posse and some of the Clash guys and that was very, very important. And Paul Simonon said that, like, before punk rock, only 3 bands that counted in Britain were Dr. Feelgood, Kilburn and the High Roads, and the sensational Alex Harvey Band, who was a Scottish guy who had some success in America, minor, but some. And again, very attacking, in your face. He was an older guy, kind of set the stage for Ian in a certain way. So that was going on. But there was definitely a for and against, There was definitely a for and Sex Pistols, well, the shop had this T-shirt that says, one of these mornings you're going to wake up and realize what side of the bed you're lying on. And I perceive that as the punk rock manifesto, the English punk rock manifesto. Now, meanwhile, of course, you've got the whole American thing, which is incredibly important. But I didn't, as a kid, know. These records were mostly on import. But we did see the New York Dolls. New York Dolls opened for the Faces. And we all saw that. And that was pretty fucking wild.
Well, and so you're getting to the point like Stiff Records and all that. So how did you meet Ian Dury? Were you working for Stiff
Well, what
at the
happened
time?
was, like, in this kind of period, Feel Goods, this kind of switch over, after the Feel Goods comes Johnny, after John the Baptist comes the Lord. So the Sex Pistols happen. So the first time I see the Sex Pistols is at a Kilburn gig. And funnily enough, I didn't realize the 101ers were meant to be that first band on the bill, but they had split up. And so the Sex Pistols got the gig instead. So that was the first time I encountered them. And they were this kind of out-of-the-world stylish posse. Do you know what I mean? And I just mean, like, wow, fuck me. Do you know what I mean? Who is he? Do you know what I mean? And he just, like, fucking, we don't know who Richard Hell is. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So this kid has, like, torn up the fucking book and redone it. Do you know what I mean? And you just, and it's that mod thing. The whole mod thing is really one-upmanship. Do you know what I mean? You want to look a bit better than the other guy, you do. Do you know what I mean? He's okay. As long as you look a bit better than him, it's fine. But, Rotten came in from this Malcolm McLaren shop, and they were just like a whole, and they had this whole posse with them. They had Susie and Jordan, and this guy Billy Idol wasn't in the band. And so they had their own little kind of mafia over there, Sid was in it, and they were in it. And you definitely could see, like, who they were a posse. So that blew up. And so punk rock kind of was blowing up. And Stiff Records opened
75, right?
76 in London in a back street storefront. Stiff Records, an independent record company, and funded by £200 borrowed from Dr. Feelgood. Two guys sat with £200. Well, it's 250 is roughly the exchange rate then. Might have been 280, might have been 250. So we're talking about $500. And they've started a record company, and the punk rock flag has gone up, and I'm like, I got to get in. Do you know what I mean? This is because that's all I was interested in. I mean, I was interested in girls, and I had been interested in soccer, and but really, music was the thing. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like so versed in it, listening to so much stuff and getting it. So I went to Stiff Records, which is the other side of London to me, and I didn't really know it that well at all. And I went there to get a job, and I've told this a few times. And, and I would go there and I'd say, like, I want to work for you guys. And they'd be like, well, we don't have any jobs. Do you know what I mean? And I'd be like, but I don't care. I just want to work for you guys. And they'd be like, oh, come back. And this kind of coming back just went on for a while. And the guy would tell me, come back in 10 days. I'd be there on the 10th day. Come back, we're going away. Come back in 2 weeks. I was in 2 weeks. And then in the end, one of the two guys, it was Jake Riviera and Dave Robinson. And then Dave Robinson, who became a very important guy to me, I think the penny just dropped. This fucking kid is not going away. He just keeps coming back. He just keeps coming back. So we're going to have to, do you know what I mean, say, okay, you've got a job. Do you know what I mean? And the first thing that Much told us, and I was like, okay, I got a job. He said, fix that bloody door. It doesn't shut properly. So that was my first job in the music business, was getting the door to shut properly, which I achieved. But, I'd been hanging out. I'd been networking. I mean, all the roadies like me because, I was doing manual labor. I was working on a construction site as a laborer, and I'd worked in the street market. So I was working between those two things. So I was no stranger to hustle. Do you know what I mean? So I don't mind picking shit up and carrying it. Putting it down. That I can do, So I started doing that. And that's when we started that thing with the roadie. The roadies were thinking, like, this kid is fucking great. Not only is he fucking, don't shut up. He, do you know what I mean? He don't mind picking shit up and carrying it, So that got me in the door. But that didn't really work out because I had no technical ability whatsoever. I just couldn't seem to grasp. They had this thing called a strobo tuner, and you tune guitars to it. And well beyond me. I just sing it spinning and spinning and spinning. I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? You know, and then I'm criticizing people like there's this band, Graham Parker and the Rumour. They did quite well. They're managed out stiff. And I'm going to the guitar player, you're not gonna wear that. I was like, you look fucking terrible. You know, and they're like, who's this? And so all this kind of built up into me not really being ideal roadie material. So I was kind of like this odd job man, do you know what I mean? And I'm telling Graham Parker, no, you've got to do Chain of Fools, man. Do Chain of Fools. Do Hold Back. No, not that new one's no good, you know. And so I had all these kind of opinions. And somehow, some way through it all, I kind of established myself as a... So you're asking about Ian. So
Yeah.
then what happened was Ian Dury is going to make a record on Stiff. Comes out, Kilburn and the High Road's folded. And Ian and his publicist put out this fake story that Ian had a heart condition because he had polio, so they had to stop the Kilburns rather than say, like, well, it's just for failure, so we've stopped because, you know, there's no point in proceeding. But anyway, Ian was making a record, and I was really excited that he was going to make a record, and I was, like, really, like, you know, really pumped. I was like, fucking Ian Dury, he's the fucking bollocks, that one. He'll come good, you know. And, of course, the first record was Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. And I was so fucking hyped that they fucking gave me the record to promote. There was this other guy, Glenn Coulson, and I kind of got him. All these, you know, I worked my way in all these various ways. So I was becoming a little bit of a force, you know. And the first record I got was Ian Dury, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. So I went around all the music papers and yelled at everybody and told them how great it was. And I still had all these records. So I went around to all the other record companies in London, all of them, giving that, saying, you didn't sign this guy, fucked up there, didn't you? Listen to this, best record in London, not on your label. You're the A&R guy. Missed. So I set myself up. So before long, like everybody in London, like, there's that mouthy little git over there. That's like whatever. And of course, you know, like the Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll single, everybody fucking wanted it. Do you know what I mean?
So
it was massive. You know, Elvis Costello is in there before I'm jumping around a bit, you know.
So how does he go from Kilburn and the High Roads to the rhyming, slang, music hall funk guy, right? I mean, because
I think he just followed his... I've got to admit that there's a gap there where I'm kind of not involved, you know. But I think a couple of things... There is. You know, I think a couple of things happened, and one of them is very important, that Johnny Rotten convinced, just by performance, convinced Ian that to sing in English. And by that, I mean not to sing in an American accent. And Ian had already started doing that, but not full out. He would do it on some songs and not the other, because the nature of rock and roll, it's written in American. You know, I mean, it's, you know, Chuck Berry is the big guy, you know. They could have called it Chuck Berry, couldn't they? That's what Lennon said, right? If you need another name for rock and roll, just call it Chuck Berry. But it's, you know, the way you sing it, it's very American. So John comes in with these very punctuated, you know, a whole other way. And Ian had been doing some of that, but it really, like, confirmed for him that they're going to dump all that shit, do you know what I mean? You can sing about Gene Vincent without trying to sound like him, you know? So Ian just got, and I think he just followed his own muse. Do you know what I mean? They made a record very cheaply, and he just made a record that he wanted to make. Do you know what I mean? So he was listening to funk, and he was listening to this stuff, and he just put it all in there. He put everything in there, you know? And I also think that it was his. And the great thing was, Kilburn's was a band, you know, and he was part of the band. And he was, but the Ian Dury record was an Ian Dury record. He met this guy, Chaz Jankel, phenomenally talented. And it was just the right thing at the right time. Although Ian, being very true to Ian, I think the first time Chaz Jankel walked up to Ian and said, you're Ian Dury, right? And he said, yeah. He said, I'm Chaz. Chaz is like a nice kid, do you know what I mean? Went to a nice school, nice parents, nice sister, except he hasn't got a nice job. Do you know what I mean? But very nice kid. And he's like, oh, you're Ian Dury. I'm pleased to meet you. I'm Chaz Jankel. And Ian's like, do I know you? He says, no. He said, well, fuck off then. And that was Ian and Chaz's first. Thankfully, Chaz was kind of like stuck up for himself and got in there. So this thing kind of developed, and they made this record, New Boots and Panties, which is, Ian's masterwork, really. I mean, I know other people say different things, but it was really his masterwork. So kind of in between Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, the Stiff Records tour happens. So Stiff Records has come up with this idea. They're going to do like a 1950s review type tour. And they're going to take their 5 big artists and they're going to go on tour and everybody's going to play half an hour. And that's, you buy your ticket, see 5 bands. And that was going to be Elvis Costello, Nick Lowe, Ian Dury, Larry Wallace, and Reckless Eric. Those were the 5. And so 5 acts, and you're going to put it on. Well, Larry Wallace, who's just like long-haired, exactly that. I love Larry Wallace. We stay in touch. Exactly the kind of bloke I couldn't stand when I was a teenager. Like, what? I ain't listening to any record looks like that. And he had this band, the Pink Fairies, which was like very much a proto-punk, black leather jackets, long hair, and as much amphetamine sulfate as you can get, And Larry was meant to be in the original Motorhead with Lemmy when they were called Bastard. They said that's what Lemmy said. We're going to have a band, we're going to call it Bastard, right? And what was it Lemmy said? He said, if we move in next door, everything in your garden is going to die within a week. They were just like fucking long-haired, black leather jacket, swastika-wearing, womanizing, drug-devouring, fucking antisocial fuckers. And that was kind of it. And that was kind of it. That's what they were going to be. Anyway, but Larry, true to being Larry, a long story, we won't go into it now. Larry doesn't have a band. And he doesn't have any more songs. So Larry amalgamates into Nick Lowe's band. And so now we have 4. We have 4 bands. So Ian, Eric, Elvis Costello, and Nick. And within Nick Lowe's band is Dave Edmonds, who's a very famous guy, is playing drums. And Larry's playing guitar, and Larry's going to sing a couple. And that's the package tour. And so the tour's going off, and I'm feeling really left out. Really left out. And Dave Robinson says to me, the tour's the next day. He said to me, you got a suitcase? I was like, no. He said, well, you better get one. He said, because you're going on the tour. You're MC with Les Pryor. I'm like, MC? He said, yeah, you get up there, right? You sit yakking to us. Get up with the microphone, and you're going to be doing it to the audience instead. And this had never entered my range of vision. And I'm like, all right, okay. So off I went on the Stiff tour, like 2 days before. I didn't even know I was going to be on it. And then Glenn Coulson was this publicist guy, and he said, right, going to send the press on the bus, and you're going to watch them, right? Make sure they don't piss anybody off, and make sure nobody really pisses them off, right? I'll give you a briefing. Each one comes along. I'll tell you, this is so-and-so. Watch out for this. This is so-and-so. Watch out for that. So suddenly I'm in the PR business as well, for real. More than just like yelling insults at people, So now I'm like working with these, yeah. And so, and we're yakking, we're all on the bus. And so I became part of the Stiff tour, And so on the Stiff tour, Ian and I really bonded. And a couple of things that happened, I know this is all taken up all the time, but hopefully no one's in a rush. We can get on. And we can get on to say, oh, sorry, I digress. But what happened was, I got early days of Stiff Records, Elvis Costello is there. Well, most of these guys are older than us. So me and Elvis kind of become friends because we're more the same age group. Do you know what I mean? These other guys. And this is, again, the age thing. Do you know what I mean? When people were 7, 8 years older than you, they were older than you. Do you know what I mean? It's not like my crowd. So I got to know Elvis very well, and he put a band together, and I was like helping out, carry all the stuff for those. So I went with him. We found picked up Steve Naive with this Scottish guy. We had to wait. Steve Naive is still Elvis Costello's piano player, I think. Well, we go to this, we've got this address, right? You've got to, Dave Robinson, you've got to go and pick this guy up, right? Drive him to the rehearsal studio. He's going to audition, and then you've got to drive him back. All right, Dave, we can do that. Bring whatever equipment he's got. Go and pick him up. So we get to this house out in the middle of nowhere, or not nowhere, but to us, we're city boys, do you know what I mean? Garden is countryside, you know. So we've got to pick this kid up. And he said, you're going to have to wait. And I said, why? He said, my father won't let me leave until I finish mowing the lawn. We're like, what? So we have to wait. We have to wait in this van while Steve Naive, whatever his name was back then, is mowing the lawn, you know? And so he finishes mowing the lawn, gets in the van, we're driving. He don't know shit. Nothing. He's like a long hair musician. Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Ravel. He don't know who the Velvet Underground is. He don't know anybody is. No, I've read about it, but I haven't really heard much. Do the Sex Pistols don't have a keyboard player, do they? No, I didn't think so. And it's completely, they called him Steve Naive. Because he didn't know anything. And of course, I wanted this blind guy. We also auditioned this blind guy, fantastic, like Ray Charles or something. And I wanted the blind guy. But Jake was like, we ain't taking a blind guy on the road. Do you know what I mean? We ain't got no money and we ain't taking the blind guy. And of course, Costello loved Naive because he didn't have any frame of reference. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a matter of like, he said, question mark and the Mysterians, you know? I'm going, because that's what Elvis was saying to me. Going to get a band, and it's going to be like question mark at 96 Tears. Going to have a band like that. And of course, Naive's like, I don't know, so just give him the record. Oh, you mean like this? Yeah, I can do that. A little mundane, but I can do that. And so they loved him. So off they went. But anyway, Jake and Costello and Nick Lowe took a deal with Columbia Records and split from Stiff Records before the Stiff tour happened. And nobody knew this, but I did. Big mouth.
Yeah, the wrong person on the tour to know.
And I never said a word.
Really?
And this changed the perception of me within the industry higher up. Do you know, people were like, he didn't fucking say a fucking, not to Ian, not to anybody. It's like one of the people that knew. And I only knew because they asked me to go with them. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I didn't want to. Do you know what I mean? Because it was all very cloak and dagger. I don't think, I was overreacting, but it was all secret and on the down low, and this was happening. And I just didn't, and the other partner, Dave, had like given me this job. He was very straightforward, and it was just one of those things. And I know we digress, but earlier than that, when I was supposedly a roadie and looking very stylish, Boogie from the Sex Pistols came up and asked me to work for the Pistols. And I said, I'd think about it. He didn't say it was the Pistols, but it was obvious who they were. Going on tour, going under another name, do you know what I mean? Going to be wild, blah, 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 blah. And then they pulled up in the car. I'm somewhere in the West End. And they pull up in the car and they wind down the windows. And they're like, are you coming with us? Do you know what I mean? You're going to do this. And three of them are in the car or whatever, and Boogie. And I said, no. And I thought right then and there, these people will not come back for you. Do you know what I mean? I'm nobody to them. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like a stylish, funny, and there was just something about them. And I just said, obviously it was the glamour opportunity at that moment, do you know? Because that was going to be a wild tour, That was going to really be, and the mod ratings of things, do you know what I mean? That would be right up the top. But my instincts told me not to go with them. And again, Costello. And then after the Stiff tour, Ian and I just kind of locked in. We locked in.
So we're going to fast forward to 79 because we're running out of time. We have to mention the Clash. Right?
Okay, yes.
So 1979, you're working for,
what's happened?
Wait, you're working for Black Hill Enterprises.
I never
right?
worked for Black Hill Enterprises, to make that very clear. I worked for Ian, but Ian's operation was run out of Black Hill Enterprises. Gotcha. And so it was perceived that I was part of Black Hill. And sometimes even they think I was part of Black Hill. But it was always very clear between me and Ian that I was getting paid by Ian. Do you know what I mean? I was not getting paid by Black Hill. I didn't do anything for Black Hill. I did for Ian. And most of the time, for a good period of time, I had an office in the West End, in the back of this very famous publicist's office. But it was good for him because I had a little flavour to the place, And Keith Moon would be there and he'd go, who are you? I go, I'm Cosmo from round by the toilets. And he'd go, Cosmo from round by the toilets. Pleased to meet you, Cosmo from round by the toilet. And he always called me that afterwards. But Autumn had the Who and the Stones, so it kind of looked good to have somebody, do you know what I mean, with a little bit of currency hanging about. But then I went on tour for a long time, and he tried to rope me in, and I didn't. And he said, well, if you're not going to, then you're going to have to go. So I was kind of using the Black Hill office some of the time. But I didn't work for Black Hill. But anyway, Ian, Black Hill, and then The Clash I had got to know. And early in the stiff days, I also, for a while, I ran a record stall outside of the punk rock shop, Saturday mornings on Portobello Road, and I was selling punk records, you know. So all these things are all kind of happening at that roadie-in kind of point. I was selling records outside of there on Saturdays, just on Saturdays. And, but very much part of that, you know, just do it. Do you know what I mean? Why not? Right? You go to the French guys down Prague Street, and you get some singles on wholesale, and you get a pitch, and you put them up, and you sell them. Just do it. Don't have to. So I had quite a good clientele very quickly, you know. And so I was doing that on Saturdays, and so all these things. So I got to know the Clash guys more through that, because that's really their territory. And also, you'd seen these guys before, like Mick Jones and things, and they would be nodding at each other. As kids, you'd go and see somebody like the Kilburns. There'd only be 20 people there, and like 8 of them are from the last one, you know, or 10 of you. So it's like, all right, yeah, you know, not really friends, but, you know, you're saying hi, or, do you know what I mean? You're both on the jukebox, and you both picked don't play the Flaming Groovies, so I just put it on. You know what I mean? So you pick something else. And so I got to know the Clash guys, and they had kind of reached an impasse, you know, and they had give them enough rope, and it wasn't the success that they hoped for, and they weren't happy with it. And actually, in Give Them Enough Rope, I actually did a press conference for them. So we'd done some work then, but this falls into the London Calling, Guy Stevens period. And at that period, I'm trying to straddle working for both. Ian's not very active, you know, and I just have to say that Ian and I were very close for a period of time that really ran from sex and drugs and rock and roll to reasons to be cheerful. And but it was obvious to me that he couldn't retain the output that the industry required. And I was suggesting, which I didn't realize at the time, I was suggesting him that he take a break. You should just stop until you've got enough stuff and start up again. You know, why you got to... But he had this fabulous band, the Blockheads, and he didn't want to lose them. You know, and so he felt he had to keep going to whatever. So there were restrictions, you know, because Ian had played America once and brought me to Atlanta in 1978, and he didn't like it. So that was off the cards, you know. And I just, you know, fell in love, do you know what I mean, with America. And in a way already had been. Alan Parker, the film director, had said the home of the post-war imagination. And I think in my period it still was, do you know what I mean? It was just so fucking different and amazing compared to... And I'm living in London, so that's the best bit. No disrespect, but do you know what I mean? You get out of London, you're out of London, do you know what I mean? It comes apparent very quickly that there's not as much going on elsewhere. So I thought that I could work with the Clash and work with Ian. And I attempted that for a while, and it became apparent that it just wouldn't work, you know. And I decided to move camp into the Clash camp, and I thought I could be put to better use. I thought I could have some influence, and it just was the right thing. My instincts told me this is the way to go. Couldn't do both. It just couldn't work out. And this was really upsetting to Ian, and he really felt I let him down. And I accept that. And but if I did it all again, I would do it. I wouldn't change anything, you know. The Blockheads were older guys, and it was just a different thing. And the Clash, to me, was this opportunity. Here was the best fucking band in the world. You know, rock and roll band. I'm not talking... Blockheads is a whole other thing. Real musicians, fine craft, you know. The Blockheads are the second best band in their world. Earth, Wind and Fire are the best band in their world. But after Earth, Wind and Fire, that's not fucking bad. Do you know what I mean? That's pretty damn good. Do you know what I mean? pretty damn good. So, but in rock and roll world, the Clash is the best rock and roll band in the world. By a fucking no question. Not even worth talking about. Done. So I'm like talking to them, and I'm like, you've got to break out of this ghetto. You've got to break out of this scene that you're in. And you've got to fucking go out there for the jugular, for the fucking big time. We got to take them on.
So was that the quest, right?
That was the quest.
They say that what Kosmo brought to the Clash was the quest. So what was the quest?
Well, the quest, in its way, was to fucking get great fucking music everywhere, popular everywhere. Not just us, but good music, stuff that had some value, or our perception of value. Do you know what I mean? And was to get it everywhere. But within that, of course, centered in that happening, the guys on point would be the Clash, and that we would fucking mash down the fucking opposition. As the Jamaican toaster, Uroy, put it in 1970, and it's never been put better. Wake the town and tell the people. And that was the job. International style. We're going to fucking go out there and fucking tell it like it is. And fucking have some impact. Fucking rock the fucking boat, but really go for it. And so that was just how could it not be more appealing? Do you know what I mean? It's that, what's that, some famous Victor Hugo quote is something like, I was 26 and I was on the side of the righteous, and you know, our flag was noble, and we had to go into enemy territory, and I would do it all again. And I would. And it was the thing to do. It was the thing to do. And so I went in with the Clash, and we fucking upped the game, you know? We upped the game.
So what did DIY mean to the Clash, right? Because they're a big band, but, I mean, like one time when we were talking, you used the words like trying to start a wildfire, right?
Yeah,
so
well, I mean,
what did that mean?
The thing that was different about the Clash than the Ian thing was, in the sense that the Clash had more of a sense of purpose in that wake the town and tell the people kind of thing. That they saw themselves as a conduit. They saw themselves as some kind of network that maybe could pull these things together. This guy, Barry Miles, who's a historian of kind of 60s London, and, you know, he's in that whole Pink Floyd, horrible long-haired bunch. But anyway, he knows a lot of people, guys in the Beatles, all this stuff. But he said to me one time, like, how, like, very early on, like Ginsberg, they had some poetry thing at the Royal Albert Hall. And Allen Ginsberg and all the Beats were there, or some of the Beats were there. And that was the network. Do you know what I mean? The psychedelic scene, the counterculture in Britain, all came out of that. And the Clash were aware that they were like a conduit for that. So it brought that kind of, I don't know if evangelical is right, but it brought that sense of purpose, and that you're going to come into town and it's going to mean something. Do you know what I mean? And Ian took that in a much more arty way. Do you know what I mean? Obviously. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Have a fucking look at me, mate. How do you think I vote? Do you know what I mean? Stupid question, you know. So Ian was kind of much more arty, intellectual, you know, much more political in the Charlie Mingus sense, you know. And those were the people he was influenced by. So he's thinking more in terms of Mingus and Albert Ayler and all this kind of stuff, which is very valid and important. But, you know, the Clash is dealing more, do you know what I mean? Would the kids spread the word? You know what I mean? Start a fire, have some influence. This is how it's done. It's not rocket science. Do you know what I mean? And so the DIY thing, I think, is that, like, I mean, almost putting that thing, what's that one, Garage Band, it's like, you know, so don't complain about your useless employment. Do you know what I mean? Jack it in forever tonight, or shut your mouth. And the DIY thing is that, like, you can do this. Do you know what I mean? It is not beyond you. Do you know what I mean? And that's what the DIY. When I was a kid, younger, in the kind of Who, that period, you know, early 70s, there was very much this aura of talent around rock and roll. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, only certain people could do this, you know. Only, you know what I mean, if you had a voice like Rod Stewart. Only if you could play like Eric Clapton. Do you know what I mean? Only if you had the technique of Jimmy Page, you know. John Bonham is like got wrists of 1 in 50 million people, you know. It's probably true. But there was this very much like, the opposite of that is this kind of, obviously, the Stooges, Dolls, MC5 thing. Like, look, it's 3 chords. All you've got to do is practice and blam it out. And we kind of learnt that from the Kilburns and Sensation Alex Harvey Band and the Feelgoods, in a different way to in America how they did with the Dolls and the Stooges and the MC5. That this was very simple. Do you know what I mean? If you had something valid to offer, something to do. And I still believe that. I mean, I'm an artist now, and I've been an artist, I guess, for about 8 years. But what it taught me was that, the DIY thing and the punk rock thing was that, don't be intimidated. What are you fucking worried about? Do you know what I mean? So some people are going to say it's shit. So what? So what? Get out there, have a go. And if you've got something to say, then maybe it will connect with somebody, This is a really dodgy person to bring up, but I think I will bring it up because it's dodgy. It's
Thanks.
Morrissey, right? Very dubious character. Very dubious character with some very, very dodgy opinions. Do you know what I mean? And there's a lot lurking back there. But he has this tune, Sing Your Life. And it's done in almost kind of like a 50s British Billy Fury kind of way. And sing your life. Any fool can think of words that rhyme. And you know what I mean? And that, in a way, is the DIY ethos. Do you know what I mean? Step right up to the microphone and name the things you love and the things you loathe. And that can connect to people. And I think that can operate on any... That's how the folk art thing operates, isn't it? These guys ain't worried. They've got something to say and they say it, I mean, Jackson Pollock, he asked his woman, is it painting? So when he's done these drips, he's not even sure it's painting. But who gives a fuck, right? It's just technique is a means to an end. It's a way to communicate. So whether or not you need technique depends on what it is you're trying to communicate, what it is you want to say, or maybe you can think of a different way of saying it. Now, I'm very unlikely ever to become a great figurative artist, but I can hone the talents I have, I can work on them, and I can think about it, and I can present some things in a way that I can communicate with people. And I know that I can because it's happening now in real time. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying I'm a runaway success, but I'm having some success. And my success is that I like what it is and people can relate to it. Do you know what I mean? I guess it depends what you want out of it, But there's no reason not to have a go. And that's what punk rock brought to London was like. Do you know what I mean? Do it yourself, literally. I mean, Ian Dury ended up having a record called Do It Yourself. But do it yourself, do you know what I mean? If you haven't got £6 for a Vivienne Westwood T-shirt that's offensive, make your own offensive T-shirt. It's not fucking, I mean, Banksy, who I think has been absolutely phenomenal in recent years. And, sure enough, everybody maybe reaches their peak at some point, and maybe he has and maybe he hasn't. But that doesn't matter. But he took art and he was like, well, I can't show it in the gallery. I'll show it on the fucking street. Do you know what I mean? Put it on the street. I look at it there. And he did it. And, people started moaning, Banksy cost 50,000 quid or cost 300,000 quid. And he's like, duh, it's a stencil and spray paint. Do you know what I mean? Go to the copy shop, make a copy, buy a knife, cut it out, buy a... Hey, it's a Banksy, right? Who knows? Who cares? So it's still au courant. Do you know what I mean? You can still do this. And with that, he fucking stormed the art world, right? I mean, he's like one of the most famous artists in the world. What's his name, Ruth? Scampy, yeah. Somebody called him Scampy, which is another... Ruth's mum calls him Scampy, which is like a name for like fried shrimp in England, And it's like great. But he was bombing something in LA, one of those waterways, right? And some homeless guy came up to him and said, you ain't Binksy, are you? He said, no, I'm not Binksy. But what I'm trying to say is it's always valid, you know? And like, I have to like go back to this thing because some of this conversation, otherwise it doesn't get mentioned enough. But you go back to the Uroy and the Jamaican thing, which was a huge influence on both Ian and the Clash. You know, the earlier stuff on Ian, more so than the later stuff on the Clash. But both, everything influence on both, you know. And like, you take a little place like Jamaica, right? It's a tiny little fucking island. And then you take a little town like Kingston. It's a city. It's a city. Okay, it's a city. Really small place. And all these amazing records come out of this place. I mean, hundreds, literally hundreds of great records. And what it is, these people are set to doing it. They've not accepted the limitations imposed upon them. And they're fucking getting on with it. And if they got something to say, they're fucking saying it. And then producers giving these guys a chance. All right. Do you know what I mean? Come to Joe Gibbs' studio. Tell me what you got. If you got it, if it's good enough, we'll record it. You know, and that kind of can do, have a go. Do you know, not be intimidated, not be whatever. I think this is the essence of it. And this is the essence of DIY culture. And so today, keeping with the DIY thing, I tried to get art mentioned in there a little bit, because this is a library and they have things in that, right? Right? I like the Emery poster, but I don't like it as much as the one I could do. So, their hands are bound, right? Because he's got to get permission from the photographer and this and that, because it's Emery University and don't want to get sued. Me, I'm an outlaw, I'm a pirate, right? You can come and catch me and hang me, right? I ain't got no money. So, I make my own one, right? The way I like it. And then what I do, I go down to Kinko's today, right?
We have the bag to prove it.
How much are the black and white 11 by 17 copies? 34 cents each. I'll have 75. Thank you very much. Thank you, 27.17. I've got a receipt for you, Randy. And by the way, on the subject of receipts, right? I didn't even know what a receipt was. I'm working for Dave Robinson at Stiff. The first week I'm there, right? You've got to get receipts that proves you bought it. All right, I'm going, first week in Stiff Records, take this receipt. He says, no good. I said, what do you mean it's no good? It's like 15 quid. It's like a third of my wages. We don't take receipts with footprints on them. That's a good lesson to learn. So, got to get a new receipt if there's a footprint on it. Anyway, so here you are. I'm in the art publishing business. Here's the print, and hopefully there's one for everyone here tonight. DIY culture in practice. So there it is. And if there's not enough, we can make some more copies and Sean can get them to you, right? Absolutely. So yeah.
We've got a copier.
So it can be done. Do you know what I mean? So you can make your own T-shirt, or make your own record, or make your own painting, or make your own photograph, or make your own film. And in this day and age, the technology is just really working with us. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I mean, everyone's got a camera now, right? Everyone's can make a movie. I mean, we should use this stuff. It should be like ongoing. Do you know what I mean? But that I learned from punk rock, because before then it seemed this cut off. You know, the record companies, you know where the record companies, you know, you get a job in the record company. Do you know what I mean? Nobody knows. Nobody knows how to get a job in the record company. And they've all got like bouncers on the door. You know what I mean? You can't even go in. You know, so you can't do that. And you've got to have all this talent, do you know what I mean? And you've got to go to this, and you've got to do that, and you've got to work at an advertising agency to make a cover. And all that got pushed aside. And all these people had to go. You know, they did Sniff and Glue fanzine. These are a bunch of kids from Deptford, you know? And fanzine. By the 11th issue, they're saying 30,000 copies. Which, by the way, predating the Ian thing, but the writing on the wall, Sniffing Glue was like the first punk rock fanzine in Britain. And I think it's the last issue or the second last issue. And there's a full-page ad for a Funkadelic record in there.
Right on.
So it shows you, because Danny Baker, who was part of that posse, he's listening to that. And a whole bunch of the kids that were first into punk rock, in England. There was this club in London called the Global Village. And all these kids, and I was one of them, not the Global Village, but all these kids were dancing, we were dancing to James Brown, Brass Construction. You know what I mean? You've got to go to nightclubs, that's where the girls are. Do you know what I mean? No good at a rock concert, go to Who, there's no girls to talk to at the Who. If they are, they've got great big boyfriends with money to buy tickets. You don't stand a chance. So in the nightclubs, you've got a chance to meet girls and dance with girls. So we're into that. So we're all dancing to that. And a lot of those super stylized kids that you see in those really early punk rock photos, a lot of those kids were really into soul music and funk music. And they dropped out of the punk thing very quick. It was almost like a fashion thing for them. And they bought a couple of the singles, but it wasn't really where they were at. Do you know what I mean? Then they're back off to see, do you know what I mean? Marvin Gaye or whatever it is.
So are you willing to take, that whole discourse on the ethos of punk rock is a great place to end the official part of the discussion.
Is that enough? Yeah.
Thank you. But this is the fun part. This is the audience participation part. Kosmo has agreed to face the music. So does anybody have questions?
Black and white T-shirt there with the beard.
Hold. We've got the
got a
mic,
microphone.
so you can end up on the video
yeah.
there. Don't give up the mic.
This could be an audition.
Or you can give up the mic
Here's
to him.
Your chance.
He knows what he's doing.
Here's your chance.
Well, so you said it didn't matter if you had talent as long as you had something that you were operating on?
Well, when I say didn't matter talent, what I mean by that is like considerable skill. Maybe talent wasn't the right word, you know, because everybody's got some sort of talent. Do you know what I mean?
I'm more interested in what it is that you're thinking about operating on. It seems like a style or just care is what you want to see.
If you've got something to say and it's worth saying, then people will connect to that. You know what I mean? Because they're getting bombarded by shit that doesn't say nothing all the time. You know, all the time. And we as kids didn't realize there's all this music being played and it doesn't mean anything. And then when punk rock came along, bam! You know, we wake up. It is that morning, and we do wake up and realize what side of the bed we're laying on. So I think, like, whether you're a guy living in Trenchtown and you're complaining about the price of flour, you know, or you're some guy in Manchester, do you know what I mean? And you're complaining that, like, you can't have sex with anybody. Do you know what I mean? People connect to this shit. Do you know what I mean? This is real. And they connect. So I guess my point is that if you have something valid to say, then you should have a go at saying it. And if you can find a way to say it in a way that can match, you know, I'm trying not to catch myself out here. I mean, I can only talk about myself. I'm not trying to make a fool of myself. So do you know what I mean? So 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chords, if you're a musician, might be the way to go, right? Some of them Velvet Underground songs are like 1 chord or 2 chords. It's all you need. And then that's just mind-blowing to some people who think you've got to be Eric Clapton. It's like, no, you've got to be able to move your finger once and then move it back again to the same place. Repeat, 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 and say what the fuck it is that's pissing you off. And I'm saying if somebody does that, that can be valid, you know, and that can be... And what you'll find is the more interesting people and the more, I don't know what you would call them people, the special people recognize this. Do you know what I mean? People like Ian Dury and John Cale are not kids when English punk rock kicks off, but they can see it. They can see it. These kids are fucking doing it. They can do it. Do you know what I mean? And they relate to it. You take a band like the Blockheads, they could relate to it. They're not trying to retreat behind their technical ability. Do you know what I mean? They're like embracing Ian's simple approach and what he's trying to do, you know? And he's like to find them. And Ian's just an example. Do you know what I mean? It could be like, you know, like grime, you know, which is like English rap. Or you take hip hop. I mean, to me, hip hop is black American punk rock. You know what I mean? I think you look at the Sugar Hill Gang and that whole thing, and like when I saw that, that was like seeing the Sex Pistols or something. Do you know what I mean? That was a fucking revelation. I could not believe that. I saw Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. They got no fucking musicians. I go back and you can't believe it. What? You got no musicians. Oh, what? So it's like disco then? They just sing to the backing track? No. The guy makes it up on the turntables. And it was just like, that's the band. And people are like, oh, it's a fucking novelty, man. I was like, no, it's a real thing. But anyway, so I'm saying again, and I think that, didn't it? The fact that you just need simple beats, make your own sound and do it. And next thing you know, you've got the Bomb Squad in New York making Public Enemy records through distorted, fucked up, right? That's how you get that sound. It's broken. It's not. It's not some clever technique. It's broken.
And bringing up hip hop, at another event, someone asked you who you thought was the most like Joe Strummer these days, and you had a very interesting Atlanta answer. So, do you remember what that answer was?
Yes, I do. I do. I've been asked it more than once. But first of all, does that answer your question to a degree? Okay. Killer Mike. Big up Killer Mike. And he's the guy. There's obvious differences, but there's always differences. Who wants two of the same of anything? Not me. But I think in spirit, I think in sense of community and direction and politic, he reminds me more of Joe than anybody, And I'm not a gun guy. Do you know what I mean? I'm not a gun guy, so he's a guy. So we differ there. But you know what? I watched Joe live in the countryside and get into arguments with vegetarians. And he'd be like, and Joe was a vegetarian, And he'd be like, these are fucking country people, man. Do you know what I mean? And they fucking kill rabbits, and they fucking kill foxes, and they do all that shit. And that's their way of fucking life. Do you know what I mean? And it ain't down to fucking whether or not they're going to eat fucking Pedro the donkey or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? It's how they are. So there's going to be differences. So I accept there's going to be differences with Killer Mike. But to me, he's the guy that most reminds me of Joe.
Other question.
Question over there?
Coming over.
Hold on to the mic.
Got it.
He also makes good records.
Don't give it up.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I have an interesting personal connection to the history that you're talking about. My father is from London, and he was born in 1960, and definitely grew up engaging in the punk scene. Was in a couple bands, and recently we found one of the records that he made online. He thought no one had any, or threw them away. None of them. Well, okay, one of them without him ended up making it, and that ended up being the Psychedelic Furs. But
All right.
yeah, but his band, his favorite band, was called the Models, and
Sure. Yeah.
cool. But he recently has found somebody uploaded a recording of or a digitized version of this single that he had cheaply made, pressed. I have no idea how much. I don't have
Right.
a concept of that. But how important do you think it is for the perpetuation of this DIY culture is looking backwards, not even looking.
Well, I think it's important because I think it's that's where you're going to get a real picture of what is going down, because the agenda is going to be more personal. Well, that's my belief. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily other vested interests. 4 kids get together in Nebraska and they've got the money to press 500 records and they want to call themselves some stupid name like Fuck the World. And do you know what I mean? And Kill Everyone is the A side, and then Get All the Ones We Missed is the B side, but that's going to give you a real window into nice, well-adjusted, suburban kids were thinking back then in their dream. But what I'm saying is I think there's an authenticity to it. There's something real about it. And what you want to know is what was it really like? Or that's what I want to know. When I'm going back through history, and I have a project with Randy that hopefully will come to fruition in a couple of years. Nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight, really. But it's
I thought it was secret.
right, well, it is secret. You won't say what it is. We'll just wind them up.
Right.
But it's what I'm saying is, You want to know what really happened. And I think these things are much more an idea of what was really going down than, do you know what I mean, say like, what four guys are who've just got a record deal and now they're worried about, do you know what I mean, the record company has got this producer and the producer thinks they should go this direction and everybody wants to get a hit because nobody wants to go back to their day jobs, you know? And I'm not saying that within that circumstances real shit isn't done, but I'm saying that people over there is maybe it's going to be realer, do you know what I mean? You look at an early copy of Sniffing Glue and this is what four kids who've never put a magazine together think about the music scene. They're just writing what they think, you know, and what they like. And it gives you some real idea of what was going on. Because later on what happens is all these people want to incorporate it. They want to defang it. They want to make it safe. And they want to make it, till you end up with Tony Blair saying like, I was a Clash fan. It's like, fuck you. No, you was not. You know, but somehow now it's got so kind of blended down. I was looking at this thing on the ArtNet News. Like, what a fucking sellout, ArtNet News. I'm not going to fucking listen to him anymore. I was looking at ArtNet News and they had this story about this woman and she's become a politician in England, right? And she's an artist, right? And she's got the leather jacket on and the motorcycle boots and the skinny jeans and all the shit. Do you know what I mean? She's a fucking Tory. She's a conservative. She's the British equivalent of GOP Republican. And what they've done is they've taken that look and they've kind of defanged it and they've made it kind of like, okay, to now, do you know what I mean? You've got a black leather jacket. Do you know what I mean? You'll be working on Wall Street and wear a black leather jacket. It's been taken away. So these things are always being incorporated. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to be careful because next thing you know, you've got like this thing like, well, you know, like all these people that like the Sex Pistols and like Led Zeppelin. Bullshit. Do you know what I mean? Maybe a few, but that was not many. Do you know what I mean? That really wasn't many people. That was a divide. Most of the people, I mean, Johnny Rotten walks into the shop that is the shop that he becomes Sex Pistol in, and he's got this homemade T-shirt, and it's a Pink Floyd T-shirt, and he's written, I hate across the top. You know, and that's what pulled them in. Do you know what I mean? We didn't like that stuff. And that's why people were trying to get something else. So you've got to watch later on, and then all these people have these vested interests. I mean, I went into this guy's office years later, and he got a Clash poster on the fucking wall, right? This guy fucking hated us. He didn't do anything for us. He thought we were a pain in the ass, and blah, blah, blah. And now history's rewritten, and he's got the poster on his wall, and he's like, you know why I've got this poster? Because this is the only one that's worth anything to me. You know? It's like, you fucking liar. So I'm saying, you've got to watch out that these things get incorporated and people take them on and can change the meaning of things, you know? So these odd little DIY things, I think there's something honest about them.
Great way to end it. So
yes, go on. One more
please.
question.
The Detroit.
Have we got to go?
It's the Detroit punk rocker gets the last
Tiger
question.
Town. Tiger
Gets
Town.
the last question.
Well, I saw the Clash in maybe February 1980 in a roller skating rink in Detroit.
Right.
That's they played at a roller skating rink. I also saw Public Image Limited there and the Jam there. That's the best gig that these guys could get, and now they're part of the pantheon of rock and roll. How do you reconcile? They were pretty much hated in America. They couldn't get airplay. They couldn't get anything until they reached.
Oh, hated by who? Not by Randy Goode.
No, not by me. By the people who count. But the mainstream didn't care for them at all. They couldn't get radio play. They couldn't get a decent gig. And then now they're
I think the gig thing was, you know, you're playing to, well, this is what you're trying to do. I mean, you're going to go to Detroit, you're going to play that roller rink. We actually played that show as a benefit for Jackie Wilson.
That's right.
Who was on life support.
That's right.
We played that as a benefit for Jackie Wilson. Lee Dorsey was on the bill, I think.
Mm-hmm.
New Orleans,
great New Orleans R&B singer, forgotten, now past, but fantastic. Human Kermit the Frog, Joe said. It's just like Kermit the Frog, isn't he? Lee Dorsey plays with us, just a quick aside here. First show, go into the dressing room to check it's all right. Joe goes, what's the set list look like? I said, but he's only written down 4 numbers so far. I said, and they're all top 10 hits. It's like, oh, shit. It's like, fantastic. But you're hoping to go to Detroit, and the people that see that are going to go out, and they're going to bring more. Not just more in the sense of more Clash fans, but expand the scene. Expand the scene. So that's what you're hoping. That's what you're hoping to do. And you know, that goes right back to very early days of the Clash. They're in the studio and making the first single, and Paul Simonon says to Bernard Rhodes, he says like, well, I'll make the covers. And Bernard says, well, how many do you think we're going to sell? He said, well, I don't know. He said, but I worked hard. I could make a lot. Bernard said, not the amount that I'm thinking. You know, it's going to be mass produced, you know. But you know, but that kind of, if it connects, and so I think that like, we were disliked by a lot of people, and a lot of those people don't admit that now, you know. And that's what I mean by how things, you remember that because you were there, you were on the front line. But a lot of it gets you're right, it gets incorporated. But I don't know, I try to remember it for what it was and try and tell it as I remember it, which I hope is a variant of the truth. There's the whole, you know, ask 5 different people, same, you know, question, and, you know, get 5 different answers, right? Although they say you ask a gypsy the same question 5 times, you get 5 different answers. I like gypsies. But, yeah, so, you know, I think you've got to be careful who's telling the story. Because they want a piece of that glory. I mean, they want to be in on it, you know?
So keep that in mind. All right. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all come get your
Come and get one
flyer.
if you want one.